We are reading Travels with Charlie, John Steinbeck, and you just started it. So you were supposed to kind of get into it last night and read the first section. So can you just tell me a little bit about why this 58-year-old man has decided to take a road trip with his dog?
He is taking this journey because he's a famous writer, and he feels that he wants to see America through the eyes of regular day people, and he's kind of seen it through kind of like in his famous eyes, and hasn't really seen it through famous other normal people. And also, he's in his 60s, and he's worried that he won't get another chance to see his country because he's
That's
also
right.
ill. So.
Yeah, he was a very famous writer, and at this point in his life, he felt like he was living a little bit of an isolated life. And because he had come from the West and he had written a lot of books about people and their struggles, he kind of wanted to find that again and see what it was like.
Mhm.
And the full title of the book is Travels with Charlie, if you notice, In Search of America. And so even the title gives us a little bit of a clue about what he's trying to do. So when you read that section, I asked you to find something to support your ideas about why he's taking that trip. So did you find anything that would kind of help you out on that? Was there anything that kind of stood out in that section that you read?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he wanted to he wanted to smell the grass and trees and sewage.
And so, which, what do you think that would mean? Why would you say that? You have
Well,
any idea?
maybe because he wanted to see like the different things, like the
That,
bad things almost.
that's a good idea. It's a good thought. I think, and only because I have read more of his work and I know kind of the way he describes things, that and I know he's taking this trip and he's feeling a little bit worried about America and he wants to see it. And when I read that, I think maybe he's thinking about some of the parts of America that aren't so perfect or so great because he wants to see it all. And at the time, it was in the 1960s and there was a lot of racial problems and as you read further, you'll find when you get to the South, he has some real issues with what's going on in the South and the civil rights movement and integration. So when I read that, having known a little bit about it, I think that's what he's getting at. But as you read, maybe you can kind of look for that as you're
Hmm.
reading. Okay. Very good. So what do you think he wants to learn?
I think he wants to learn what America was like for him, that for like how he today for them for him in the 1960s.
60s, a while
Because
back, a little bit before your
yeah,
time.
he wanted to learn what it was like because he's kind of been out of the loop almost, and
Right.
he wanted to see how it is. So.
He is out of the loop. Very good. So, what I'd like you to do is pull up your response journal because we're working on personification. And one of the great things about Steinbeck is the way he expresses himself in his writing. He uses so many great of the literary ideas. And one of them we're working on is personification. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, it's giving human traits to non-human things.
Right, that's right. And sometimes that just makes the person feel more involved. And I asked you to do two things. Find three examples of personification and write what you read and actually give me the quote from the book and then what you think about that, why, and then we can go over that. So can you see that? Can you?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so can you read me the first one you found about what you read that shows personification?
The first one I found was okay. The fair Eileen swung sweetly around and put her bow into the wind.
Right, good
But the
correction.
two lashed boats dragged anchor, swarmed down on fair Eileen, and bracketed her. She was dragged, fighting and protesting downwind, and forced against a neighboring pier, and we could hear her hull crying against the oaken piles.
Wow, that's a lot of great descriptive sentences in there.
Yeah.
So, and I like that you said Steinbeck makes the boat sound alive. It sounds like a woman fighting in the storm. It really does. Can you give me some ideas? What are some of the words that gave you a clue that he wasn't just talking about a boat? And maybe you could write those there. Just what are
Okay.
the clue words?
When when they said she swung sweetly,
Right. And then Farrah Lane, do you remember who he named his boat after?
his wife.
Yes, his wife. So that makes it even a little more personal, doesn't it? And in
Yes.
this, he was saving his boat from this crazy storm. And he makes it sound you are so worried about this boat because he had so much of the personification in there.
Hmm.
And in this part of the book, he actually, I don't know if you remember, he jumps out with a knife and he goes out and saves the boat by cutting the rope that ties it to the other boats that he thinks were trying to hurt it,
Yeah.
basically. So, I mean, he's kind of out there, but it's a great scene because it really makes you worry about the boat, which I've never worried about a boat before. So, if you could write a few more, Swung Sweetly, that definitely is an idea, example of personification.
And then also when they said they bracketed her,
Okay. And what does that sound like it means?
they're like trapping her and like keeping her captive or something.
Sounds like they did it on purpose, right? For a couple
Yeah.
of boats. That's a lot of thinking. Okay, great.
And then also when they said that she was dragged fighting.
Ugh, that sounds bad, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then also protesting, because you don't like think
Protesting,
of a boat protesting.
not so much.
And also her whole crying.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
Yes, it is.
And that's great. And you can see the difference. If he just wrote that his boat was stuck in a storm and some other boats ran into it, you wouldn't probably feel as much. You might feel bad for him about his boat, but not as much as you feel when you read something that makes it sound like this is a living creature, something he loves.
Hmm.
So that's just one of the great things about him. Okay, how about the next one?
Okay, the next one. Um, Even Rocinante, dirty and pine needle covered as she was, seemed to leap over the road with joy.
Okay, and who's Rocinante?
Rocinante is his car.
Yes, his very special car or truck. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and what in there let you know? He didn't just say, my truck is very dirty and we went off on a trip. What does he say about, what kind of words does he use that let you know that it actually feels something?
And they says he leap like she seemed to leap over the road with joy.
Right. And how does he refer to her? Not an it, but
She.
a she. Right. So right away you're thinking, wait, what are we talking about? She. So he refers to his truck as a she, and his truck leaps with joy.
Hmm.
So that definitely makes you feel a little more. And that's the whole idea of personification is it draws you in and it makes you feel a little bit more than you would if you hadn't heard those words. Right. So what I'm going to have you do next is on the next section, we're going to read about 15, 20 pages, whatever you have time for. And before we do that, I want you to, we want to go over some of the vocabulary because when you are reading, and especially a book that has some of the language that is a little bit older, because this was written over 50 years ago, and some of the terms he uses and some of the language aren't as familiar to you. And when you're reading, I don't want you to stop and look up words all the time because I want you to enjoy the flow and the way the author meant for the story to be read. So it's important to be able to look at the words in the context and see if you can look around them and figure out the vocabulary words. Okay, so I have some examples for you. So if you could switch on your docs to the page on the preview,
Hmm.
vocabulary. Can you get that up?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, great. Now, these are actually quotes exact from the book. And what I want you to do is read, and then you'll see the highlighted part is the word that I thought you might not know what it meant.
Hmm.
So if you could read that, and then what I want you to do is as you read it, think about the words around it and how they might help you understand it. Okay, so then we can talk about it. So go ahead, start the first one, please.
Okay. The clattering stream on the rocks was a good, reposeful sound, but the conversation of the farmer stayed with me. A thoughtful, articulate man he was.
Good. Okay. So the word reposeful was probably not a word you hear every day,
No.
but you've heard a lot. Okay. So, but if you looked at it, I wouldn't want you to stop and have to go look it up. I want you to enjoy the book. So, can you get an idea of what that means by the words around it?
Hmm. It is describing a sound. It is describing the
Okay.
sound of the clattering stream on the rocks,
Okay.
and um, And it's a good sound
It's
because
a
it
good
says
sound.
it was a good reposeful sound. So
So it's not
I
screeching and annoying anybody.
so I was
Okay.
thinking that it was a good peaceful sound.
Okay, very good. That is what reposeful means. It's kind of a quiet calm. And I think this is where he was kind of enjoying maybe some of the sounds of nature. So,
Hmm.
but you see how you can kind of understand what's happening and it doesn't take away from the story, but you don't have to go look it up. Okay,
Hmm.
and the rest of that?
Um, but the conversation of the farmer stayed with me, a thoughtful, articulate man he was.
Okay, so what do you think articulate could mean?
I
Gives
think
you some clues.
articulate is like, well, I think it's describing the man, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
second thing describing him because it also says he was a thoughtful and articulate man.
Okay.
Um, and it's the conversation with the farmer. So I thought like it was like he's a good speaker, and
Okay.
he's a good speaker.
That's good. That's what it is. It means clear, distinct speech. So he's talking about the farmer and how thoughtful and articulate he was. He's remembering a conversation he had. So that's excellent. That's the way when you're reading a story and you want to keep moving forward that you can just kind of get some ideas by looking at the clues around it. And that's just learning to find the words, the vocabulary, and understand it in the context of the story and the sentence. And so what another thing this does is it gives you another illusion, like we talked about earlier, because it's a labyrinth at kenosis.
Hmm.
Kenosis is, is a part of Greek mythology
Yeah,
and the Minotaur and all that great stuff.
yeah.
So it's also another, he does this a lot in here. You'll find I kind of want you to keep your eyes open for a lot of the illusions he uses, which the more you read, the more you will pick up on things that people will allude to in other works, whether it's movies, TV, books, whatever, but it just makes it more interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the important thing is, I want you to remember that when you're reading the book that has vocabulary that gets a little bit tricky, just to go ahead and stop and see if you can find some context clues that are around it that will help you figure it out so that you can enjoy what you're reading. And you can stop and write it down, and maybe if you want more information on it later, make a quick note and go back to it or ask me, and we can always work it out and we can have a list of those. But when you're actually reading for enjoyment, I want you to be able to continue on. Okay? All right. So what I would like you to do, I know I'd like you to read the next section, which
Okay.
starts, this is they're just getting ready to take off. So they're leaving Sag Harbor. So on page 10, and he already has Rocinante equipped and ready to go. He's got Charlie vaccinated and ready to go.
Hmm.
So the boat's all safe and taken care of, so he can kind of take off on his trip. So what I'd like you to do is to make a few notes on the next two characters he meets, okay, as he takes off on his trip.
Yeah.
Because what's important to him is not just to meet famous people. He wants the everyday people. It doesn't have to seem like somebody really important. It could be somebody at the gas station that he asks for directions because he's always lost.
Yeah.
Okay. It could be a coffee shop where he stops in because he wants to talk to the waitress or the people in town because he wants to find out what their small town is like. Okay.
Hmm.
So I want you to notice that as we go through this book, everybody is important that he meets, from somebody he spends 10 minutes with to somebody he spends a couple of days with, because it's all helping him see America and the way it really is. Okay. And some of the people he meets, he gets along with, and some he doesn't. But the important thing is, as you're reading, to take notes on the people he sees and how he reacts to them, what they mean to him. So, and then if you'll write that down, I want two characters and then maybe three traits of each character. What kind of people were they? What kind of interaction did he have? And how he felt when he left them.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Can you do that for me?
Yes.